Anastasia. Yes, this is indeed a real opportunity to turn over the monad. Curiously, the principle of rule and control in society today is presented to people in the form of a pyramid with its top pointing up. At its bottom is the majority of the population, in fact, those surviving in the beggarly conditions that were artificially created by politicians and priests. And at the top, there are only a few endowed with power by this society who live by using public wealth and have most of benefits and privileges. But if the sign is turned over, we get a triangle with the top pointing down, according to the principle of creative Allat as the symbol of society, in which there is no rule as such, where each person, while perfecting spiritually, improves their life on account of benefiting the entire mankind, where the world society controls the processes of its life, moves in the spiritual direction, and uses all the amenities and resources. This is exactly the movement from lower to higher. This is the real progress, a qualitative evolutionary leap of the human civilization. Rigdon. Quite true. So actually, there's nothing difficult here. Simply people themselves should actively engage in the process of transformation of society and create to the best of their ability the necessary conditions for education of nations, unification of the world community, and for human civilization to follow the spiritual vector of development. The main conditions for creating such a society. 1. Improving people's spiritual and intellectual literacy. 2. Human spiritual self-perfection and his active participation in the life of society. 3. Independent unification of nations into a single world society. 4. Abolition of the global system of rule of priests and politicians. 5. Stringent restrictions on individual wealth. 6. The governance of society must belong only to society itself as a whole. 7. Most important of all, ideological transformation of the society, which is inseparably connected to the domination of spiritual nature and moral values both in the person and in society. As every person should keep track in himself of manifestations of negative thoughts coming from the animal nature, so society as a whole must control its collective public thoughts. And because the main source of the latter is mass media in all its forms, society itself must keep an eye on its cleanliness. That is, what should be developed is the culture of popularization of spiritual and moral values, knowledge, good, conscience, honor, dignity, and friendship among people, of positive creative models and examples of thinking, the best human actions both of the personality and groups of people. There should be no propaganda of negativity imposed by the animal mind, of wars, violence, murder, strife, hatred, selfishness, and so on. Moreover, the initiative and the matter of popularization of the constructive ideology must come from society itself, as well as prevention of any attempts of imposing the destructive ideology upon people. These conditions are the basis for the formation of a united world community with a spiritual vector of development. Here, it is important to understand how significant is the role played in the life of humanity by an artificial information field which people themselves create while being either conductors of the will of the animal mind or conductors of the will of the spiritual world. Today, it is no secret that thanks to mass media, a certain human communication mass is being formed in the world, which outnumbers any largest physical gathering of people many times over. But also in this artificial information field, various patterns of uniform perception thinking, behavior, and actions of people are also created, spread by means of infection and imitation, and function, and they form this invisible unified mass. That is, there's massification of consciousness and behavior of many individuals who belong to objectively unrelated social groups and cultures. Transpersonal communication connects and unites different people. But what is remarkable is that in contrast to the physical crowd, in this large mass, each person individually, by one's own choice, connects to a flow of one or another information, which eventually makes up a common diverse information field. These flows, like thousands of streams, have their direction, expansion, strengthening, and deepening into programs of one or another information channel that unites them. Within limits of the material world, there are only two diametrically opposed vectors of information, from the will of the animal mind and from the will of the spiritual world, each of which forms its own information field and accordingly its critical mass. The latter, as a phenomenon, is subject to the laws of the physics of the material world, only on a global scale, and implies this mass, which is necessary to start a self-sustaining chain reaction in the human society with employment of an enormous amount of energy. Thus, when there is an obvious preponderance in the global domination of programs of one of the two information fields, from the will of the animal mind or from the will of the spiritual world, thanks to the human communication mass, the monad will turn over. Anastasia. That is, outwardly, illusory, the highest possible degree of individualization of people kind of remains, and a person seems to be free to choose how to get information, for example, whether to listen to the radio, read newspapers, magazines, watch different TV channels, and then discuss it with other people, or pay attention to various messages and entertainment on the internet. But it turns out that there is no freedom as such, and all this is just an illusion of individualization. In fact, by choosing something out of civilization's offerings, a person connects to an artificially created information field, which one can say forms a mass out of thin air. After all, most people, just like him, watch the same channels on television, read the same newspapers, listen to the same radio, visit the same websites, and communicate online via social networks. And the degree of orientation of the activity of such a mass is constantly monitored and controlled with, for example, TV ratings, the highest website traffic, popularity of certain articles in the press, and so on. But this is a veritable massification of psyche, which has previously been practiced by shamans with a tambourine, magicians by means of rituals, and the like enchanters in front of the public. Only now, the same ancient mechanism of influencing the human consciousness is carried out with new tools and on a more global scale, but principles are the same. At first, the audience is provided with a certain set of information, a single system of its perception by the masses, common goals, and value orientations are created. The modern communicator broadcasts messages which cause, for example, the suggestion of stupor, non-critical imitation, and blind submission, that is an emotional and psychological condition that is common for the audience. This eventually leads to a buildup of a certain pattern of thinking and behavior formed by this information of the human communication mass and the direction of its attention, and therefore also actions in the program direction. Moreover, it goes unnoticed for the individual who makes up this mass. Rigdon. Quite true. This is an influence on the human consciousness that has been known since ancient times, but today it is used in fundamentally new quality, and its global differential is that in the artificial information field, which broadcasts the will of the animal mind through people conductors, with all the variety of information which stimulates the animal nature in a person, an individual, in fact, has no choice. For the personality, this is a dead end in spiritual development, no matter how much information a person gets from this source. For all this information will focus the person's attention on prolongation of the animal mind's life. However, in the information field, which has been artificially created in humanity and which broadcasts the will of the spiritual world through people conductors, the choice remains for an individual, since by receiving the truth, due to its reproduction in pure form by such people through the same artificial information field, every person gets an opportunity to know himself, to become an observer from the spiritual nature, that is, to connect to the global information field, which in its essence can in no way be compared to the limited, artificially created information field of mankind created in the material world. And so a person will help his personality grow and qualitatively transform spiritually into a new being. And that is the key difference. Anastasia, you said it exactly right. A limited, artificially created information field. For the mass consciousness, a myth is created through mass media, first of all television and internet, and actively supported and cultivated, which forms a certain perception of the world, creates mindsets, and in its diversity contributes to the mutual strengthening of information. This myth reinforces in consciousness of an individual, in essence made up causal relationships between real objects, generates legends about events and public persons of the past and present, and forms or presents a ready-made invented model of attitude towards reality. This fragmented knowledge about the world, but served in such beautiful wrapper myth, creates among the masses an illusion of comprehensive knowledge about the world and those events that take place. The same principle of false perception triggers in them as in the audience at a magician's show. I saw it, so it must be true. Although, in fact, people do not even analyze the received information on their own and do not bother to understand the reasons of who needs the masses to pay attention to this information and why, while looping it on such a narrow range of matter of the three-dimensional world. Despite all the external variety of information, people are actually dishabituated from thinking independently by rebuilding the perception and thinking of the audience after their own fashion. The clipped character of the flow of different messages alone deserves special notice, where the main aim is to excite emotionally and attract attention to this or that message. Rigdon, I would say more precisely that the main goal here is not to attract, but to distract the attention of a person from his inner spiritual development. Besides, if you look at all the diversity of today's information, at its basis you can see the single material root and activation in a person of desires of the animal nature, where everything is built on provoking specific emotions and forming a certain mindset in the crowd under the cross-influence of various sources of information. Anastasia, indeed, if a person is on the animal nature's wavelength, then in fact he has no choice, as he does not even realize that he is an object of external manipulations, and he perceives the images and thoughts imposed upon him as his own ideas, without thinking about the true source of their origin. But when a person is an observer from the spiritual nature, he has something to compare to. He really has a choice. He understands how the animal mind influences him, what the spiritual world is, how fleeting life is, and how important personal spiritual self-perfection in it is. Rigdon, Yes, that is all true. Many people, unfortunately, do not even give a thought to whence various thoughts appear in them, why they give attention to them, and keep up the life of one or another program in themselves. Who and why needs to make it so that a large number of people, among whom like a speck of dust are also you, would see one or another impressive story, film, a shocking message, or read an emotionally charged article. People do not think about the original source, what this information carries in itself, whom it really serves, what is, in general, behind one or another artificially created information field worldwide, to which a person gives his attention, wasting valuable time of life on it. Here is a simple example from the life of a modern average family resting at home in the evening after working day. As a rule, everyone is busy with their own informational entertainment. Some spend time online, focusing their attention on messages, games, and entertainment that excites them the most and captures their attention. It is enough to look at the official statistics and the names of the most visited websites to understand what hooks of the animal nature still hold people's attention, forming a mass of a certain type with its own characteristics. Other members of the family listen, for example, to music, experiencing emotions that correspond to this melody. Still others watch TV, empathizing with the characters of films and programs and mentally taking part in a virtual action. And some people are busy with domestic chores, but they also scroll in their thoughts information, for example, about the moments that affected them psychologically, events of the day, news obtained from mass media, or about their current personal problems. But in absolutely all of the above mentioned, the attention is equally captured to the utmost by their avocation, which in fact has a material vector and is connected to the forces of the animal mind. In fact, all these occupations are empty. This is informational distraction that destroys lifetime. And life, like water in hands, runs out quickly. It seems that a person has not done anything bad, but nothing good has come from his existence either. By its content, life ends up being empty, like an ear of grain in the wind, which was blown about here and there, and then rotted on the vine without giving spiritual fruit. Same here. Everyone, like ears of grain, is distracted from their spiritual development by external information. People's consciousness becomes so narrowed, fixated on this or that emotion and thoughts from the animal nature, that in these moments, nobody even thinks about the spiritual, not to mention about doing serious work on themselves. Though, in fact, spiritual development is the most important thing in the life of any person. It is the meaning of his existence. The person empathizes emotionally, gives much attention to an empty illusion which does not give him anything, as it does not enrich him spiritually. But this illusion pumps out emotions, power, from the mass of people formed by it. Everything that an individual gets after participating expansively, intrusively, impulsively, emotionally unrestrained in this illusory for the psyche of the masses show is devastation, strengthening of thoughts, emotions, and desires from the animal nature, in fact, poison for the soul. Thus, the formed mass of people that have been engrossed by this or that informational illusion, which casts each individual into a kind of illusory reverie and ignores any hint at his spiritual development, is invisibly controlled by the animal mind. Each day, people unconsciously give their life force to it, paying their attention to information of the animal nature, and thus, like donors, constantly feeding and increasing the power of the animal mind. But awakening spiritually, a person begins to think about these vital for him questions. he begins to realize that until then he was just an unconsenting element of reproduction and of distribution of information from the animal nature for this mass. By awakening spiritually and working on himself, a person, in fact, makes his true choice. He becomes an active conductor of the will of the spiritual world, contributing to the dissemination of the truth in the existing artificially created by people information field. The truth becomes power, which multiplies his capabilities many times over. Anastasia. Yes, the truth, as it turns out, is very simple. So it appears that at this stage, the animal mind is actively creating a system that in theory should globally cover the consciousness of the majority of people on the planet. Rigdon. Unfortunately, that is so. A tool is actively being perfected right now, which includes all the super effects of new mass communications. This tool is already well known to most people on this planet, I mean the Internet, as one of the most effective means of massification of the human psyche today. Nowadays, the Internet, which is rapidly taking place of television, is being actively implemented around the world. Every effort is being made to provide mass access to it for different nations, that is to attract the maximum number of people to the World Wide Web. Its advantage over television, print media, and radio is that the Internet combines all these means of mass communication, but is less costly and therefore more accessible to the masses. It retains a degree of human individualization, but most importantly, embedded in it is the disposition to reproduce and duplicate information across the world at the expense of the formed mass itself, as well as of opinion leaders and active people. However, this global technology also hides the animal mind's weak spot, and smart people should take it into account. If previously a person, while in a physical crowd and understanding all the absurdity of actions committed by it, could in actual fact do little to change the situation, now every active person is given such an opportunity. In other words, thanks to Internet technologies, even one man in the battlefield is already a warrior, for he is one, yet brings spiritual truth to many people. Each person gets an opportunity to reproduce information, quickly transmit and replicate it. Everyone who has received this information is given the right to make his own conscious choice to continue to serve the destructive will of the animal mind or to implement the creative will of the spiritual world. Now, such unique conditions have formed under which humankind can use its chance and turn over the monad towards spiritual development of the civilization. It can create an entirely new social world order using the tools of informational influence of the animal mind upon people for the purpose and in a direction that is completely opposite to it, development of humanity in the spiritual and creative way. The personal contribution of each person to the common cause of spiritual and moral transformation of society is very important. One can say that every, even the most seemingly simple and insignificant thing done for the purpose of disseminating the truth, in the end, one way or another, affects the global situation in society and forms its future. Like the sea is formed from many streams and rivers, so the global creative information field is formed out of thoughts and actions of the many people who accepted the truth and became its active conductors. If a person who has all this information wishes to disseminate it, then it is necessary for him or her, 1. To provide people with the entire extent of knowledge outlined in these books while trying to disseminate it to a maximum number of people across the planet. 2. To contribute to the processes of unification of people on the basis of this information, which will invariably entail a change in behavior and attitudes, as well as formation of new values and spiritual self-education of the community. Provided that these objectives are implemented, it is inevitable that a self-sufficient world society will form, which will be capable of organizing itself, solving important issues, and implementing the decisions taken. Active communication of its every participant will only serve to strengthen, support, and expand the impact of this information, convey a certain emotional and psychological tone to other people, inspire them by an example of behavior, the general idea, and actions. In general, there is nothing difficult here. The main thing is to convey information to people in pure form, be an active participant of the process of formation of the new society, and to constantly work on yourself. People have dreamt of such a society since the dawn of times, calling it in their legends the land of good, the state of bliss, the golden millennium, the world of justice, millennium, that is the future that can get closer by divine intervention, but will be reached through human actions. For example, in Christianity, the concept of millennium belongs to eschatology. The Greek word eskatos, meaning the last one, finite, and logos, a word, a teaching, that is to the religious teaching about the final destinies of the world and the human, about the last stages of the domination of the animal mind in humanity. Eschatology looks at the topics of the future millennial reign of Christ after the second coming, the return to earth and his victory over Satan, of the Armageddon, the final battle between good and evil at the end of times, in which kings of the entire inhabited earth will take part. But who is it? Who, in the context of this Christian teaching, is called Satan, the animal mind of the material world? Suffice it to look around to see what's going on. Struggle for power, the priestly political and economic violence of gangs from the archons over nations, dominance of market and consumerist attitudes which form purely materialistic thinking in people, relationships based on the animal instincts. There is a veritable aggressive informational attack on the human society by the animal mind, in fact, an information war. The modern human more often chooses matter and hardly comes out of the sphere of influence of his animal nature, his earthly selfhood and selfishness. As a conductor, he imposes this model of behavior onto others, without even noticing that he is in the grip of the will that is alien to his spiritual nature. This is precisely the power, the guise of Satan, of the animal mind who has enslaved mankind and is now walking around in it without a mask. But the opportunity to change everything is in people's hands. People are waiting for divine intervention, but it is the same as with human dialogue with God. It can be achieved only by choice, actions, and real spiritual transformation of a person himself. The Bible has the following words of Jesus to his disciples: "I will ask the Father, and he will give you another comforter, that he may be with you forever. That is the Spirit of truth, whom the world cannot receive, because it does not see him or know him." The knowledge has been given to man, and his choice and action depend only on him. And changes in the whole global society depend on actions of every person. For all the living people, this is really the last remaining chance to spiritually save themselves and the civilization. Building such a society is a necessity, since this is the only model that will allow humanity to survive in the future. It is actually easy to build it. The foundations have been given, while the details of this new model will not be hard for people to work out together. Already now, there are many competent and clever people who really can and want to change the modern society, make it free and equal, not on paper under slogans of the archons, but in life from the perspective of domination of the spiritual nature in a human. Building such a society depends on the actions and the personal choice of each individual. The archons have accustomed people to doing nothing and to waiting passively for someone to come, decide, and do everything for them. They have limited the present freedom in their system for a person to a place on the couch where he can spit at the TV set as much as he wants and curse at politicians and priests because nobody will hear him anyway. But it is easy for one to destroy this imposed illusion in oneself. One simply must not sit back and do nothing. It is necessary to transform yourself and society and be a messenger of peace in the full sense of this word. Anastasia. A messenger? Well said indeed, because a messenger is inherently the one who brings knowledge. And in the modern world, this name is also given to a character in a classic tragedy who narrates outside the scene about what is happening. Given all the above mentioned, a messenger of peace is one who knows and explains the hidden meaning of what is happening to all people who are watching the performance on the world stage. Rigdon. All of us, while in bodies, take part in the theater of matter. The spectacle is shocking, but it is edifying. The truth reveals itself to the eyes of some, while others are absorbed by the performance. The only difference is whose side your consciousness is on in this place of illusory shows. A messenger is capable of communicating the truth to many people, friends, relatives, acquaintances, and strangers. He is able to induce the desire in them to tell the truth to their circles, and they can tell others. And so the message will fly around the world like a falcon in its swift flight. How fast this information will disseminate in society depends on people themselves, on the efforts of each messenger. The more there are of those who get inspired by the truth, the more there will be of those who will begin to change the situation in the global society according to their opportunities at the local level. All conceivable available means can be used for dissemination of information, verbal transmission, mass media, including radio, press, television, and the main lever of mass communication today, the Internet. If every person applies his hand, his mind, and the purity of his intentions to it, then this original information will spread very quickly around the world, and within a short period of time, this idea will permeate the majority. And in the majority lies the real power. Once people receive and get inspired by this information, they themselves will understand everything, how to improve the life of society according to their real abilities, and the tide of universal unification will start. So a lot depends on one person. The main thing is not to sit back and wait for mercy from the archons. The genuine spiritual side of a human being in relation to society is manifested in his sincere intention and selfless action for the good of society. Once united in such an intention, people will be able to achieve more and create conditions to form an entirely new civilization. Humanity that will be guided by the essence of the word, АllatRa. The secret of this word was once kept in their circles by the spiritually initiated people who were resisting the power of the animal mind in any of its manifestations. These were the true warriors of light, the keepers of the primordial knowledge. For their feat of arms, the truth was revealed to them. There is no power greater than the spiritual power. By possessing the primordial knowledge, you also possess the power. By possessing the power, you influence with the word that is the glory, the name, and the call. The glory heralds the truth in the radiance of immortality for those who have been crowned in honor in approaching the One. The name manifests the sign of the primordial one, which is the basis and the key to understanding events. The eternal call is the primordial sound, the sound of creation. It fills the sign with the power of Allat and makes it mighty in creation. For Allat is the manifestation of God's will. It is the all-inherent force, the foremother of everything created according to His will. The worthy one follows the eternal call of the soul, resounding the cry of the soul's victory, АllatRa. Everyone who hears it is a summoned one, and together are the power capable of changing the entire world. The creating power coming from God is АllatRa. No period has been placed at the end of this book because the final word rests with people.